Hello, welcome to the Harry Glorikian Show, where we dive into the tech-driven future of healthcare. Quality control is one of those things that a select few people pay attention to until something goes wrong. That's doubly true in the pharmaceutical business. Episodes like cross-contamination in a drug factory can shut down a production line and create instant shortages of important medicines. And if a contaminated medicine ever does get shipped out to clinics or stores, people's lives can be at stake. So drug makers are usually pretty receptive toward any new technology that can help them detect manufacturing problems before they get out of hand. That's the market opening that Taylor Chartier says she saw back in 2020 during the coronavirus pandemic. You probably remember the stories about the Baltimore company Emergent Biosolutions, which was manufacturing vaccines for Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca and had to throw out millions of doses of both vaccines due to suspected cross-contamination. Taylor saw those stories too, and she thought there has to be a better way. So she started her own company. And today, her startup, Modicus Prime, is partnering with top pharma companies to use new AI capabilities to catch drug manufacturing problems faster. She says the company's machine vision software can analyze data from existing cameras and other hardware on a production line and identify a problem within 0.6 seconds of capturing the image. That's fast enough to shut down a line and fix a problem immediately without having to throw out the entire batch the way most drug makers do today. Obviously, that could mean millions of dollars in savings, and ultimately, AI-enhanced forms of quality control promise to lower costs across the entire healthcare industry. So I wanted to have Taylor on the show and talk through it all. I especially related to her comments about why she's a fan of mixed martial arts and how starting a healthcare company is a little bit like ultimate fighting. For that, you'll have to listen all the way to the end of the interview. And so here's our discussion. Taylor, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, it's great to have you on the show. I mean, I've known about the company for quite some time, even before you and I had a chance to meet in Harvard Square. When you explained the technology to me, I'm like, yeah, I totally get it. I know exactly what you do. Well, I think it's a good thing because it just clicked very quickly for me. But I know that the main selling point for Modicus Prime AI service is something called mpVision. And, that's something that helps companies in research or manufacturing drugs maintain higher quality control. But I was thinking about it, before we jump into mpVision specifically, can you help listeners, maybe explain to them what is the main quality control challenge, that drug industries are sort of facing it? What are the different ways processes break down or production lines can become contaminated? How do these problems come up? Are they the result of human error? Why are they so hard to detect these problems? I mean, maybe a primer on that before we go into this, because your technology is sort of pointed right at some of these issues.
That's a great idea, Harry. Thank you so much. I'd be happy to provide some context on the pharma industry in general, especially when it comes to quality control. It's a bit of a niche industry when you talk about biopharma. So happy to shed some light on the topic. Definitely in terms of the public eye and what was really highlighted during the pandemic, COVID-19 just really opened up Pandora's box. There were a lot of reports in the media covered by cross-contaminations with, as we are all familiar with Johnson & Johnson's product, with AstraZeneca, seeing hundreds of millions of doses being discarded due to contaminations. It was very disheartening to the public. But what's really interesting is that contaminations are actually systemic to the industry. This was not something that just happened during the pandemic, as we know. And in fact, every year, a pharmaceutical company on average will have a drug product quality failure that occurs. It's a $50 billion resource. Unfortunately, it looks like every year these companies are continuing to struggle to maintain optimal quality control. And we're looking at it in terms of when we talk about contaminants, as you had said. A lot of these contaminants, about a quarter of them actually, come what they call are particulates. And these can come from a variety of sources. They can come from the equipment. They can come from the particular vials, for example, if it's delamination. They can come from glass particulates that come from the vials of, for example, a vaccine. They can also be introduced inadvertently from the technicians. It could be pieces of hair, pieces of rubber. There's a vast variety of contaminations that can be introduced during the drug production.
So, I think for people in this area, and when I mean local, I mean the local Boston area, I'm sure that most people who've been in the industry remember back to 2009 when a Genzyme factory here in the Boston area that made protein drugs discovered like this viral contaminant in their bioreactors, and they had to shut down the whole plant. It took 10 months to identify the virus, track down the source, disinfect the whole place, and then restart everything. Is that the kind of problem Modicus Prime can help prevent?
Yes, exactly. A Genzyme has been through it. They all have. And it really points to the complication of creating what has been called recombinant proteins. These are not your typical Advil or some of your other small drug molecule drugs. These are very complicated when a host organism is grown in a bioreactor, as you were referring to. And then the manufacturing process that takes place is really just to isolate and purify this protein, which is this active ingredient, from these cells. Oftentimes, those can be Chinese hamster ovary cells, and you just are extracting this protein from them. It's massively complicated with many purification stages. And exactly to your point, this is exactly what mpVision can help address, either whether it's at the bioreactor stage during the fermentation process, or at any stage subsequently during the purification skids, when you're going through chromatography columns and your different types of viral inactivation, all those stages. There's quality points at every step, and that's exactly the challenge that pharmaceutical industry faces.
So I want to take a step back, just one step, right? And just have you give us a little bit on your career path, right? I mean, how did you decide to build a career around quality control and drug making? Not something that somebody just slides right into, as far as I know, but, maybe start with your training. I mean, as far as I know, you have an MS in chemical engineering and a PhD in AI applications in systems biomedicine. And to be honest, I didn't even know there was such a degree. And you were at Bayer for a while. I mean, walk us through, like, how you got from where you were to where you are now.
Oh, happy to do so. And just touching back on that PhD you were referring to, I was actually at the University of Luxembourg pursuing a PhD when Modicus Prime was born. The entire school system and many others in Europe also, they actually shut down temporarily. And what better things are there to do with your spare time than to start a company? Pharma was working full speed ahead, and I had actually I was working in pharma more on the data science side. After University of Rochester with my chemical engineering degree, I popped over to Shire in Boston prior to its acquisition by Takeda, and just had the opportunity to really support various biologics license applications and perform root cause analysis for quality issues. And I would apply AI and ML in those capacities to really help optimize pharmaceutical production. So when I saw all the things that were transpiring with pharma during that time, and there was that pause in my life, I thought, well, I'm just going to reach out to some of my former colleagues and see, hey, how can we help? I know exactly the types of algorithms that can be used to address some of these issues. And it was one of those classic PhD dropout stories where the opportunity was there, the timing was right. And our first customer was actually a top 10 pharma. We incorporated, jumped right in, and we're just had an amazing partnership from the start.
So maybe now's a good time to sort of maybe dig in a little bit into the inner workings of mpVision. I mean, personally, I don't need to be sold on the idea that computer vision and AI can transform the drug industry process, but if you could help me sell the listeners on that idea, because it's something that, coming from pathology, visualizing, diagnosing, identifying. I mean, this is a very common sort of thing, but if you can do it in process and find something very quickly, it can sort of help you triage and manage the process. But, help us understand, what happened in the last few years on both the vision side and AI side to create these new capabilities. What does mpVision do? That sort of thing.
You mentioned pathology. Pathology, they have just been a North Star. Taking a look at medical devices, already there are over 500 AI medical devices that have been approved by the FDA. Just really tremendous progress has been made in the AI space. And it makes sense, specifically when you look at pathology. About 3/4 of all of these AI medical devices are for specifically imaging. And if you look at hospital data, 80–90% of that are images. So computer vision is definitely the most mature AI type of application. And pharma has done a really great job of leveraging a lot of the guidances for what they call AI software as a medical device. They've taken a lot of that, I think around 2021, and kind of brought that over to now the manufacturing side. And you're looking at the same type of outputs that you look for in pathology. It's very similar in terms of what you're looking for. You're looking for example, anomalies. So instead of looking for an anomaly like a tumor, you're looking for an anomaly of, well, is this a heat signature that shows there was a temperature spike during production? Or is there some sort of morphological change that could indicate there was some shear stress in the bioreactor? These are the types of visual things that you can see and characterize in, for example, with mpVision. So we're really excited to see a lot of different pieces come into play with the pharmaceutical production industry. And we've seen just last year, there are other organizations that have helped further translate the FDA guidances into actions that the industry can actually implement. So GAMP, Good Automated Manufacturing Practice, they had their 2nd edition published last year. And it really shows in a systematic way how to take AI computerized systems and validate them for production. That was a huge question because compared to traditional computerized systems in pharma, they're not data driven. So now we really have all the pieces in place, and we're seeing actually in production, we're seeing visual inspections, we're seeing chromatography AI applications. These are now reality, and though not everybody is familiar with it, the path is really clear for more AI like technologies like mpVision to be integrated in pharma.
So tell us how this works. I mean, is it, do you extract a sample and put it under a microscope? Is there a camera that's in line in the process? Do they have to train their platform? I mean, just give us a visual for how you would put this into play.
Yes, so you can consider mpVision as a software layer that you can add to any pre-existing imaging hardware at any unit operation in pharma. So we've already talked about how many images there are in hospital systems. Pharma, the same thing. We're talking about, you mentioned microscopes. Image flow cytometers, microflow imaging devices. There are just a myriad of technologies that are already being used for quality purposes in pharma. So there really is no additional exchange, no upgrade of hardware that needs to take place. The software directly integrates via our API with any of these pre-existing hardwares. And then once these images are actually uploaded to our system, we are cloud-based, though we do also have on-prem offerings. Once these images are essentially collected, it enters then our workflow. We have a platform that's end-to-end, and it really helps whoever the end user is, if it's a researcher, a domain expert, a technician, they're able to, if they know the product, they're able to use our platform to upload these images and then teach the AI what specific type of quality characteristics that they want that AI to detect. We were talking earlier about how it could be shear stress or heat stress. It could be an anomaly. There could be some type of, for example, an air bubble that they wanted to detect, or a silicon oil particle. Anything that they think is significant to the quality of their product, they're able to teach that AI what it is. And just with the click of a button, the AI model, it's all encapsulated. It starts learning, what are these features? And traditionally, there's this what's called feature engineering. And that's when someone might use mechanistic modeling and they come in with different parameters and decide, okay, this feature is significant and will help differentiate what's a contaminant, what isn't. That's the beauty of AI. It will do that all for the end users. And at the end of the training period, you end up with an AI model that you can roll out for real-time quality control that already has learned everything that you have taught it to from that data set you introduced it to.
But I would assume that, once you've seen a certain type of contaminant or a bug that you need to identify, you probably have a library that people can access and utilize in their everyday, so they don't have to train again if they don't want to.
Yes, that is one of the huge value adds of our technology. Like you said, a library. That is exactly the desired output for many of our end users. They have a very unique portfolio. So in each of the drugs that they're manufacturing, they may have certain contaminants or certain quality characteristics unique to each one. So they can create their own library. But another one of our benefits is we do not take their data and save models that we then distribute to other pharma companies. We don't do that. It is all confidential to them. And if they want to create their own unique library, that is their own competitive edge, that library is theirs, and we're happy to support them.
So you mentioned something, because I was under the impression that the business was a SaaS style business, or for those listening, software as a service. But you mentioned that you also have an on-prem, which means they would be able to have a process where they would be able to download this or have this specifically at their site, as opposed to being up in the cloud. Is there a big difference for different users, or is one more powerful than the other?
We do see there are differences in terms of scalability, but oftentimes it's actually preferable on the pharmaceutical side to actually have this offering on-prem, because in many of these cases, they're actually the ones who are in control of the compute. GPUs, as we all know, that's a huge requirement of this technology. And on times where a pharmaceutical company might not know beforehand how much image volume that they're going to be processing, they may want to have control over the amount of GPUs or the amount of images that they process and have a better understanding of that. So in terms of our business model, it's oftentimes where if the pharmaceutical company offers to pay for the compute, they'll have asked for an on-prem, and then they take care of that on their side, and then we just provide the support for the infrastructure.
Yeah, I can imagine the smaller ones are probably willing to maybe go to the cloud, and then the bigger ones might want more control over the process.
Yes, exactly.
So you mentioned some of the defects and contaminations that the algorithm can be trained to look for, but I guess here's a question. So you're looking at this, how fast does it detect the anomalies? Does it happen fast enough to shut down a continuous process before a whole batch of medication gets ruined? I mean, these are the sorts of questions I'm thinking of, like that value add that someone gets from having real-time feedback.
Absolutely. This is absolutely the huge output from using this technology in what we call a GMP setting, good manufacturing process setting. So in manufacturing, the typical workflow now is if any type of quality characteristic that may be negative is determined, the entire batch has to be tossed. The FDA will just say, get rid of it, that's it. And that's oftentimes because during the visual inspection, for example, as one approach to quality control during your final fill and finish, you take a statistical approach where a sample is taken and it's supposed to represent an entire population of all of the vials, for example. So if that vial is contaminated, then it can be assumed that it is representing the rest of the population.
Right.
Now that is obviously very limiting. So when you have compared to that approach, a real-time system that's used to detect different types of contaminants in real time, that is where the real-time processing is absolutely crucial. That's where the compute comes in. And exactly with our technology, we're able to detect things within 0.6 seconds, so that in the event that there is, during a batch, there is some sort of contaminant detected, the end users can actually be able to stop and isolate where that batch has an issue, and then release the rest of the batch to the public, saving them millions of dollars and also saving the public health as well.
So maybe now's the time to sort of step back. And I was wondering sort of the type of AI that Modicus Prime is using. I mean, right, especially these days, right now, all the hype is around generative models and, more powerful and more capabilities and ingesting more data. And, what is it? The overlords are going to come and get us. But, I would almost call that sort of adaptive AI. But you guys are using a different kind of AI. I mean, I think you're using what's called static AI versus what I just referred to as adaptive AI. Can which one is appropriate in sort of the high stakes applications like you're talking about in drug manufacturing, and why?
Yes, you exactly distinguish the two various buckets of AI that we see today. And for sure, anytime that you're in a regulated environment, static modeling, that is exactly the way to go. We've seen tremendous success with static models. And just to kind of describe what that means by static, the building of the model is still a very iterative process. And so by that, we mean that when you're introducing this model, for example, operationally during production, you are continuously monitoring it, the inputs, the outputs. And if there is, for example, a new type of anomaly that's detected, you are then able to state, well, we haven't seen this anomaly before, and our static model detected it as an anomaly, but it wasn't able to characterize what it is. We want it to know what this is. We want it to understand the next time we see this foreign object, we want it to be able to detect and tell us what it is. So then as part of this static model operational process, we can actually introduce then that foreign particulate into a training data set. and then have that model learn it. So that here's where the iteration comes in. And then you redeploy then that static model. So now it knows exactly what that new particulate is, and if it comes again, it'll detect it. And you can do this every time something changes, like the data input changes. But once it's been deployed, the performance, it is expected, it's anticipated. You're able to monitor it. As part of mpVision, we actually have an AI model calibration module, and you're able to actually visualize and see and confirm that, yes, the model performance and the architecture has not changed. It is the same. And yes, we can improve the performance, but for now, this is what we're deploying, and we can be confident and trust the outputs.
So I don't know if you have maybe a case study you can share, but I'm sort of curious about what happens when someone adopts this process. Can it speed up manufacturing? Can it reduce cost? Can it help with regulatory compliance? Is there some, I don't want to say a canned case study that I'm sure I'm not the only person that's ever asked this, but that asks this sort of question of, like, in a real world example, how did this get put in place, and what are the levers it pulled to make a big difference?
Yes, I would be very happy to share with you many of our implementations and use cases. As we understand, this is very confidential, and we do respect the privacy of our end users, our customers. But I will share with you very specifically the different use cases. We have been talking today about contaminations, and that is absolutely a massive issue. But when we are referring to the overall safety, integrity, purity, efficacy, the CIS-PQ of drugs, there are many other facets of quality control, right? And mpVision actually addresses those as well. Our end users have been very creative, and there are so many different images as we've shared, and so many different spaces. They've actually been almost educating us as well, what unmet needs and quality that they can implement in mpVision to address. So it's very specifically, there are a couple of main verticals that we've seen. We already talked about the contamination of the quality control, where we've actually been able to demonstrate that it would be a 60x cost savings with continuous processing with mpVision. And we also have over 99.9% accuracy that we've demonstrated to one of our top 10 pharma customers in detecting particular contaminants that are unique to them. So that's definitely a massive use case. But what we've also seen is, if we shift back, we were talking about bioreactors, right? So in the very beginning, where you have the proliferation of these host cells, this is a very subjective process where it's like a cauldron, right? And you're tossing in all these ingredients, and you're like a gardener in a way. You're growing these cells that have this drug product inside. Well, the cells, if you want to think about it, sometimes they're happy and sometimes they're not.
I was going to say happy cells. It's all about the happy cells.
Yes, the viable ones. The viability, that's actually one of the KPIs, the key performance indicators that you look for. It's like a quality check to measure the happiness of these cells. So if you do not take care of the cells, and there are terms for that, passaging the cells and helping them to grow to the next stage, to help them create more of your drug. If you don't do that correctly, after 45 days, for example, of processing, some of our customers, they will experience what they call batch failures. They'll lose everything. This is not at the end of the final product where you have vials. This is early on, where, again, amazing amount of resources have been put into this process, and the cells die, or there's some types of contamination. So what we've seen is there are very particular morphological features that can be used and monitored to identify the exact time when the end users can decide whether to passage the cells or not. You can think of it like a short time window to avoid these batch failures from these cells early on. So that is a huge quality issue that is being used now for our end users to prevent these batch failures. That's one group. We also mentioned another vertical. We were talking about having the cells produce more drug. So that's referred to as titer, oftentimes with the proteins specifically. And you really want to make sure that that titer or that drug you're producing from these host cell organisms is the highest you can make it. And there are certain types of morphological features that can be tied to when that titer is the highest. And that way you meet those, those quality expectations of, how much drug that you have when you're at the final production line. So we've actually been able to implement there for understanding how we can be consistent with when the cells are, quote, happy and when they're producing the maximum amount of drug. And then I'll say the last vertical, this one has been absolutely really tremendous from our side because it's in the cell and gene therapy space. We've been talking about recombinant proteins historically. This is how traditionally a lot of these different hormones and enzyme therapies that the scientific community is providing to patients. That's a typical methodology. But cell and gene therapies, now we're moving away from the proteins that have been, engineered. Now we're moving into what's called cellular therapeutics. And in this space, this is where mpVision actually has what we are discovering the highest unmet need. And the AAVs, so vectors, adeno-associated viruses, it's a new methodology. So instead of treating with a protein, like for example, insulin, you're treating patients, now we're moving into looking at cells, and these can be, if you're looking at CAR Ts, for example, you're looking at your own T cells, if it's autologous, or other individuals' T cells, if it's allogeneic. So now it's a different modality, but this is just another vertical that we're seeing mpVision implemented in.
That's great. I mean, it seems like the opportunities are fairly endless. Although as a startup, you got to pick one at least and turn the crank as many times as you can for revenue standpoint. But so about a year ago, I was talking to Erwin, who's the CEO of eLabNext, on all about digital lab notebook software. And I think you guys have a partnership with them. So can you talk about how mpVision integrates within eLabNext software? And then what do customers do with it?
Yes. We've been talking about the pharmaceutical space, and within pharma manufacturing, there's also your drug development, your drug research, a little upstream of that manufacturing. All of it is tied together. Every stage, there should always be that element of quality, repeatability, transparency. And so at every stage, we see opportunities for AI to be used. When it comes to more of the laboratory research, which eLabNext is fantastic for, they have an electronic laboratory notebook offering that we are integrated into currently. So globally, eLab is a fantastic partner. We are one of their add-ons in their marketplace. They have a myriad of other add-ons that they also offer as well, and we're one of their AI offerings. So all of these labs who are experiencing quality issues on their side, they're actually able to leverage us. We've seen actually the numbers, just taking a step back, it's been reported that $28 billion is lost each year due to experiments that are either irreproducible or have errors in them. It is a really difficult thing to do research, number one, and then to do it again, number two, is even harder. And so a lot of times that, unfortunately, it can lead to some errors and waste of time. We've seen from our own actual customers that they've reported that for some of these softwares they're using for their experiments and life sciences, they unfortunately say that it's about an hour and a half of just simple, software recalibration and like traditional things that sometimes take so much manual time, and sometimes they introduce human error there. Those are things that we help completely eradicate just due to the AI aspect of and the generalizability of our offering. So they're early, they're upstream. A lot of them are working on drugs, but with eLab customers, they're very wide across life sciences too, agriculture. We've seen a tremendous amount of use cases in other areas as well with them.
So I'm going to take a little detour, because I noticed on the company blog, there's a post called Fighters and Founders, where you compare startups to ultimate fighting or mixed martial arts. And I feel like that sometimes myself in this world, but there's even a snapshot of you and your engineering director, Valentia
Shevchenko.
Thank you. I apologize. But she's a former world flyweight champion in ultimate fighting, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. What was the message in that post? I mean, what were you trying to get across? And then you'll forgive me, but I don't remember you being a UFC or MMA fighter yourself. I don't know if you're a fan, but maybe you can give us a little bit of insight on that post and where you were trying to go with it.
Yes, I would be happy to. So related to the personal side for UFC, I am a huge fan. I'm a tremendous fan of UFC. So the director of engineering who you see there, David, so his brother is actually a professional MMA fighter. And he is currently actually in Dublin training with Conor McGregor's gym. He's training. So we're huge fans of MMA and UFC in general. But the specific reasoning behind that post, I have so much tremendous really respect for a lot of these fighters that you see every Saturday or so. There's a fight night, or there's a pay-per-view, and some of the champions, when you hear what they say after the fights, one of them, Sean Strickland, he's the most recent middleweight champion. He beat Adesanya. It was a huge upset. One of the things that he said before was, look, when opportunity comes, it usually comes knocking at the worst possible time. You're not ready. You don't think you have everything in place. You don't want to put in all the effort because it's 2 weeks notice, for example. And he says, you just have to do it. You just have to go. This is what you worked for your whole life. You just have to do it. You have to take every opportunity. And that's just one of the many things that when I see that, I'm like, wow, it's just like a startup where, I don't want to wake up at 3 a.m. because, working, with our Austrian end users, might be difficult at that time. Like, no, you embrace every single moment in startup life. If there's an opportunity, you go for it. And every day you're constantly working to improve, to talk to customers, to improve yourself, improve the product, to constantly just be a better version of yourself. And that's really what I was trying to get across there with the fighters, is like, it's a fighting spirit. They're constantly doing the same thing, but the company is themselves. Like, they are their own entrepreneurs. They are building themselves, and no one is believing in them in the beginning. They're constantly trying to always improve. And it just takes incredible amount of faith in yourself and in the industry that you're working with, and just to believe that you can be a champion, you can make it. And those are the parallels that I saw.
Oh, it's interesting because I've heard Mark Andreessen describe it as, when you're an entrepreneur, you almost have to enjoy getting up and getting punched in the face every day, to the point where you actually like the taste of your own blood and you get up and you do it again. And it's sort of true to a certain degree. You've got to enjoy being bludgeoned for a while until you can make it. And even then, somebody will try to bludgeon you even after that. But um, it does take a certain mindset to want to get up and do it over and over and over every day. So look, it seems like the company's on a great track. I know that you guys are, and you'll forgive me because I haven't read the latest pre-seed, right? Still?
We are considered, when it comes to the definitions of stages of companies, yes, we're considered pre-seed, but we do have, we've had some really tremendous traction with some large sharks.
Yep.
We've actually, in our pipeline, we were approached by one VC who said that they have never seen a pipeline like we have in a pre-seed company. It's just the way that it's working out. But as you know, when it comes to graduating to the different levels of what investors consider the stages of the companies, they're looking for repeatability, and as you know, I mean, as an investor yourself, you have all that actually absolutely nailed down. So we are going through those stages, but ours is a little bit different because we have so many big partners that we're working with in parallel. So once those all close, we're really excited to be, yes, who knows, it might even be Series A. We might not even do a seed at this point.
It's all about valuation.
Yes.
It's all about valuation. So listen, it was great having you on the show. I'm glad we were able to get you on and talk about this. I think it's a critically important area, and this whole area of applying AI to images and seeing things that a human being can't see, and speeding up the process and saving money, and of course then producing a great product as a result of all this process is critical to like I said, making good product and producing something viable for people to buy. So I can only wish you the most incredible success.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Harry. It's just been an absolute delight speaking with you. And thank you so much. This conversation and conversations like this really help spread awareness of AI technologies across spaces that really need it the most to help patients, to help people until health becomes an inalienable right. So thank you for helping, elevate the conversation, and hopefully we'll have some more dialogues that will sprout from this initial conversation.
Excellent. Great having you on the show.
All right. Thank you, Harry. Take care.